He was calm, too calm for what was about to happen, dressed in a navy three-piece suit, collar relaxed, no tie, just enough elegance to say he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He walked through the terminal like he owned it, and what no one knew was, he kind of did. But to the airline staff watching him approach the gate, none of that mattered. To them, he was just another black man walking alone. The moment he handed over his first-class boarding pass, something unspoken happened. The gate agent smiled, but her eyes hesitated. Her voice didn't match the ease she had just used with the passengers ahead of him. "Mr. Collins," she said, scanning the ticket without a flicker of recognition. She didn't know who he really was, but she didn't care to find out either. He thanked her, walked on, and boarded the aircraft, carrying nothing but a leather duffel, a quiet presence, and a name that would soon shake the industry to its core. He didn't expect luxury to look like this. It was understated, perfectly lit, every detail designed to whisper status. As he stepped into the first-class cabin, he knew instantly, this wasn't just about the experience. It was about signaling who belonged and who didn't. But he had chosen this seat for a reason. No entourage, no assistance, just him, quietly stepping into a role most would assume he hadn't earned. It wasn't arrogance, it was observation. He had come to study a company he was about to take over, to witness the culture behind the brand before finalizing a $500 million deal. What better way to see the truth than from inside their most exclusive space? The plan was simple: watch, take notes, see how they move when they don't think anyone important is watching. But the moment he arrived at his seat, 1A, everything changed. Someone else was sitting there, a man who looked like he belonged on a billboard for wealth. White, mid-50s, champagne in hand, legs crossed like the seat was his inheritance. He didn't glance up, didn't flinch, didn't look surprised when the man whose name was printed on the boarding pass quietly said, "I believe this is my seat." What happened next wasn't a mistake. It was a reveal. The flight attendant approached, blonde, polished, cold. She didn't check his name, didn't ask for ID. She simply said, "That seat has been reassigned." Just like that. As if the transaction, the confirmed booking, the entire system of order meant nothing because of what they saw when they looked at him. A man who didn't fit their idea of first class. She gestured to a seat farther back, business class, still premium, still expensive. But that wasn't the point. She hadn't even bothered to ask if he was the one who belonged in 1A. She just assumed he wasn't. He stood still, calm, composed, years of discipline stopping any visible emotion from rising. "There must be some mistake," he said. "That's my assigned seat. I paid for it." She responded with the kind of smile designed to dismiss politely. "We had a last-minute request from a platinum-level guest, Mr. Brent Hargrove, legacy investor, travels weekly. He specifically requested 1A. It was meant to sound like policy, but it felt like protocol disguised as preference, the same kind of subtle exclusion that's never written in the employee handbook, but somehow always understood. She didn't ask Hargrove to move, didn't offer an alternative, didn't even blink. Her tone was final. She was asking for his compliance, not his input. Not one person in the cabin interrupted. Not one nearby passenger questioned it. They all watched with quiet approval or passive indifference. But he didn't sit down, not in the new seat, not anywhere else. Because it wasn't just about that one moment. It was about all the moments just like it that had never been challenged. He asked to speak to a supervisor, not loudly, not aggressively, just firmly. The flight attendant's smile faded. She insisted it wasn't necessary. "We need to complete boarding," she said. Translation, "Fall in line." He remained calm, but now something in his stance changed. It was subtle, the kind of stillness that warned you not to underestimate him. And she knew then, this wasn't going to be easy. What they didn't know, what no one on that plane knew, was that this man, Derek Cole, had the power to undo everything they thought they understood about status, control, and consequence. In that moment, they thought they were protecting the image of their airline. In reality, They were burning its future from the inside out. Because sometimes the most expensive seat on the plane isn't paid for with dollars. It's paid for with dignity. And when you strip that from the wrong person, you don't just lose a customer, you lose everything. And they were about to learn that, the hard way. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't make a scene, but the silence around him was deafening. Every movement in that cabin, every sideways glance, every uncomfortable shift in posture revealed something deeper than just a seating mistake. This wasn't confusion, it was confirmation. The way the flight attendant kept her voice low, as if she was doing him a favor. The way the man in seat 1A didn't even acknowledge him, didn't even pretend to be surprised he was being prioritized. And then the whisper came, low, smug, but sharp enough to cut. Don't take it personally, pal. Sometimes we just have to know our place. The words weren't shouted, they didn't have to be. They were delivered like truth, like tradition, with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in a room that mattered. Passengers heard it. They chose not to react. A few glanced over, then looked quickly away. One couple leaned into each other and exchanged a comment just loud enough to be overheard. Probably an upgrade mistake, she muttered, trying to pass off some startup founder as a VIP. Her husband didn't even lift his eyes from his tablet. Must be using points, he replied. The words landed exactly how they were meant to. Quiet insults dressed up as casual conversation. But he didn't move. He didn't flinch. Instead, he listened. Moments later, the curtain at the front of the cabin shifted. The galley just behind first class, meant to be a place of quiet preparation, had become a stage for something uglier. Two flight attendants stood there, speaking in hushed tones. They didn't know anyone in the back could hear them. They certainly didn't expect the man they had just downgraded to be listening from row 12. "You saw him," one of them said. "Do you really think they want someone like that sitting next to Brent or the board?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was matter of fact, like she wasn't even aware of what she had just admitted. Someone like that. That's all it took to pull the curtain back on something far more dangerous than a seating issue. This wasn't about policy. It wasn't even about comfort. It was about image, control, power, who gets seen, and who gets shifted quietly to the back. And that was the moment he knew. It wasn't personal. It was systemic. The airline hadn't just made a bad decision. They had revealed how many layers of bias were built into the machine, from the way tickets were checked, to the unspoken codes of who gets the benefit of the doubt, to who gets removed to maintain the experience. Every decision that day had followed a pattern, one they likely never even questioned, until now. But that wasn't the only crack. Just as the hum of the engines returned to a steady rhythm, a voice beside him quietly broke the silence. The man in the aisle seat, older, white, wearing an airline loyalty pin, hadn't said a word until now. He was the kind of man these airlines catered to, polite, silent, comfortable, but without turning his head, he said it. "They did the same thing to a young man last month," he went on. "Sat him right next to me. Quiet, respectful, had the boarding pass and everything. 10 minutes later, they moved him, said it was a manifest error." He paused. Funny how those errors never happen the other way around. It wasn't just observation. It was confession. From someone who had seen it all before and stayed quiet. And that, more than anything, was the point. It wasn't that no one noticed. It's that no one wanted to speak. He turned slightly toward the man, studied his face. "What happened after?" he asked. The older man looked back at him. His voice was steady. "Nothing. That's the point. No one said anything. They were afraid of making it awkward. And awkward always loses to comfortable." Those words hit harder than anything shouted, because they were true. The problem wasn't just bias. It was the silence that protected it. He leaned back, letting it all settle. He wasn't thinking about Zurich anymore. He was thinking about the algorithms, the coded policies, the quiet exclusions dressed up in customer service, the way power protected itself through silence, and how often silence disguised itself as politeness. It wasn't broken by accident. It was engineered to run this way. And then the real shift happened. Not in a boardroom, not through a lawsuit, but through a girl in seat 12A, a college student, young, observant, angry. She had seen enough. She pulled out her phone, opened her camera, hit record, her voice barely a whisper. "They're making him get off the flight," she said. "He didn't do anything. He just asked for the seat he paid for." Her hands trembled, not from fear but from knowing what she was witnessing. A black man, calm and composed, being escorted off a plane for daring to stay in his seat. She posted the video, and that was the match. Within minutes, her live stream hit 10,000 viewers, then 100,000, then it exploded. At Flight 348, Justice for 1A. He paid too. The hashtags didn't need explanation. The footage said everything, and as he walked off the plane, flanked by 2 uniformed security officers, he didn't protest. He didn't yell, but his refusal to shrink, that was louder than anything they could have expected. Every person on that flight, whether they admitted it or not, felt the shift. A reckoning had started, not with fury, not with fire, but with quiet, calculated presence, and the world was about to see it unfold in real time, because the story wasn't just going viral, it was about to hit the one place the airline thought was untouchable, its money. The cabin was tense, not loud, not chaotic, just tense in the way silence becomes oppressive, like the whole plane was holding its breath. The man they had quietly pushed to the back, the one they thought they could dismiss without consequence, was gone, escorted off the aircraft, and for a moment it seemed like things might return to normal, the clink of cutlery, the low hum of conversations, a crew trying to patch over what just happened with routine service and polite smiles. But something had shifted. The air itself felt heavier, and then he came back. No announcement, no warning, just Derek Cole stepping back through the curtain with the same quiet authority he had entered with the first time. Except this time, the power in the room realigned instantly. The man who had been framed as a problem passenger had just walked back into first class, not as a guest, not as an intruder, but as a storm contained in a suit. And suddenly everyone wanted to know, who is he? Why is he back? And why does he look completely unbothered, like every step was intentional? Brent Hargrove, still lounging in seat 1A, stiffened slightly. He glanced over, confused at first, then defensive. "You again?" he muttered, voice trying to sound amused but cracking under tension. "Weren't you escorted off?" Derek didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch just long enough to become uncomfortable. Then, with the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove, he said, "You've mistaken quiet for weakness." His tone wasn't raised. It didn't need to be, because what he said next shattered the entire illusion of control on that plane. "What you're doing here, what this company just did, won't disappear quietly. You've played yourself." Hargrove scoffed, tried to recover. "You think you have power here?" he said, gesturing vaguely toward the surrounding seats like they were allies. "Do you even know who I am?" That's when Derek reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a card. Not a business card, not a boarding pass, but a sleek, matte black access card, one with an emblem that needed no introduction to the right people. Valter Capital, the firm behind multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. The name whispered in boardrooms and feared in finance. And in that single moment, the room changed. Hargrove's expression faltered. Bryce, the flight manager, visibly paled. Natalie looked like she had just seen a ghost. "You don't need to know who I am," Derek said, holding the card up just enough for them to catch the detail. "But Atlantic Air does." Then he stepped calmly to the aircraft phone mounted near the galley, pressed a line, waited one beat, and delivered a message that would be heard in conference rooms around the world. "This is Cole. We're going live. Initiate Clause 7C, Zurich line. Freeze all integration. Notify legal and trigger investor alerts. Atlantic Air just violated operational trust. Immediate breach terms." No one breathed. Passengers who moments ago had judged him by the seat he sat in were now watching a man dismantle an entire corporation in real time, with a phone call. Brent tried to interrupt, his voice suddenly small. "Wait, Walter, are you saying—" But Derek cut him off without even looking at him. "I'm saying the airline you think belongs to you," he said, "belongs to me." The words hit like thunder, controlled, final, unshakable. And then the dominoes fell. First came the silent notifications to terminals in London, New York, Frankfurt. Systems that rarely blinked began flashing red. Trading desks at major firms started fielding questions they couldn't answer. Why is Walter dumping Atlantic Air? What just triggered a 9% drop in under 60 seconds? By the time financial anchors picked up the anomaly, it was too late. A stock that had been quietly stable for a decade had just nosedived 27% in under 5 minutes. There was no press release, no investor call, just a vacuum of information and a live video feed of Derek Cole being marched off and returning like a ghost with a vengeance. And then the world found out. Walter Capital released a 2-line statement confirming the activation of a freeze clause due to breach of equity ethics. It didn't name names. It didn't need to. Screens in airports, lounges, offices, lit up with headlines. CEO removed from his own seat. $500 million gone in 10 minutes. Tweets turned into threads, threads into articles. The students' live stream was replayed alongside collapsing stock tickers. Hashtags swarmed across platforms. Nay Cole clapback, nay power in silence, nay flight 348. For the first time in its history, Atlantic Air wasn't trending for innovation or luxury. It was trending for shame. Inside the plane, the reality had sunk in. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an awkward incident. It was a catastrophic misjudgment. Executives watching the news scrambled to call damage control teams. Board members flooded email threads with legal concerns. Bryce received a message directly from HQ, red label, high priority. Natalie saw her own face begin trending on Twitter as a symbol of corporate bias. But the one who remained frozen was Brent. The man who had called it just a seating preference, who had mocked Derek with casual racism and smirks of superiority, now sat silent. Because he finally understood that the seat he had claimed with entitlement now felt like a trapdoor. And it was only just beginning. The plane was still cruising at altitude, but the mood on board had fallen hard. No one was laughing. No one was sipping wine like before. The passengers who had earlier side-eyed Derek for simply existing in first class were now staring forward, eyes locked, lips tight, unsure how to sit with what had just unfolded. The curtain between classes no longer felt like fabric. It felt like a dividing line between ignorance and reality. And on the wrong side of that line stood Brent Hargrove, once smug, now visibly shaken. His champagne, once lifted in a toast to arrogance, now sat untouched. His words, once thrown like darts, were swallowed by a silence no one dared to break. Every second ticked louder than the engines, but the consequences hadn't finished boarding yet. As the crew scrambled to maintain some semblance of normalcy, notifications kept flooding in. Devices pinged silently in the pockets of flight staff. Bryce, the lead manager, received a real-time update from corporate legal. Emergency board meeting called. Stakeholder alert initiated. Internal ethics investigation underway. He didn't even have time to read it twice before the next message came in. This one less polished, more urgent. Do not engage the passenger again. Any further action must go through legal. And yet some still tried to hold the line, to act like nothing had changed. Bryce made a hollow announcement about continuing on to Zurich without delay, trying to add warmth to a voice that now sounded robotic. It didn't matter. No one clapped. No one cared. They had all just witnessed power shift, live and unfiltered. What had started as a routine upgrade issue had detonated into a global spectacle. And sitting quietly in seat 1A, where he always belonged, was the man they tried to erase. Brent, grasping for control, leaned toward a neighboring passenger. His voice, once soaked in entitlement, now cracked with disbelief. "There has to be some misunderstanding," he mumbled. But no one responded. No one comforted him. The same silence he once weaponized now wrapped around him like a cage. Derek didn't acknowledge him. He wasn't interested in debate or drama. He was interested in documentation. Quietly, he opened his notebook, added a single line, and closed it with the same precision as everything else he did. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't pettiness. It was a record, a ledger, a reminder of what happens when power is abused by those who think they're untouchable. Then the landing sequence began. Zurich was minutes away, but no one was thinking about the arrival anymore. They were thinking about what waited when the wheels hit the runway, and just as predicted, they didn't have to wonder for long. The moment the aircraft stopped and the doors opened, they were met not with baggage handlers or polite customs agents, but with suits. Legal, security, internal affairs. They didn't look at Bryce. They didn't speak to Natalie. They walked straight to Brent. "Mr. Hargrove," one of them said, tone as cold as policy, "you are hereby notified that your privileges with Atlantic Air and all its partners are revoked effective immediately. Your name is under review by every GI certified carrier. You may collect your belongings and disembark under supervision." Brent didn't argue. He couldn't. He looked down, gathered his things with clumsy hands, and stepped off the plane with none of the swagger he had when he boarded. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was final. His seat was gone. His access was gone. And just like that, the man who once talked about breeding and the natural order of things was reduced to exactly what he had always feared being, accountable. He wasn't the only one. 2 more agents boarded, this time for Natalie and Bryce. No shouting, just procedure. Quiet, calm, absolute. "Please remain on board for internal debriefing," they were told. The looks on their faces weren't of shock. They were of realization. They knew what they had done, but more importantly, they knew who had seen them do it, the whole world. Inside the terminal, Derek walked past a line of executives, PR directors, HR heads, regional managers, each with a carefully rehearsed apology just behind their teeth. One woman stepped forward, introduced herself as the Vice President of Crisis Management. She said all the right things. "On behalf of the company, we deeply regret a full internal review, immediate suspension of those involved." Derek nodded once. No anger, no applause. He didn't need their apologies. He had their structure. He owned it now, and what came next wouldn't be about emotion. It would be about correction. Back on board, passengers filtered out slowly, still whispering about what they'd witnessed. Some were stunned, others inspired, all of them aware that they had been part of something irreversible. One woman, a retired civil rights lawyer, began typing a column in the customs line. Another, the student who had filmed everything, now had over 8 million views and 3 interview requests from national news outlets. Her footage wasn't just viral, it had become evidence. In the days that followed, the consequences didn't slow, they scaled. Volta Capital pulled out of infrastructure projects. Contracts were cancelled. Licensing deals terminated. Atlantic Air didn't just lose value, they lost credibility. Internally, reforms began. Not just performative ones, but foundational ones. Hiring protocols were rewritten. Anonymous reporting systems were installed for staff. Quarterly equity audits were made mandatory. And for the first time in the company's history, executive bonuses were tied not just to profits, but to cultural accountability. And yet, Derek never gave a press conference, never stood in front of a podium. He didn't need to. His presence had said everything. His silence had been louder than the outbursts of 1,000 press releases. He didn't go viral for a soundbite, he went viral for a standard. 1 month later, in a quiet hangar in Newark, 30 people gathered. No cameras, no microphones, just crew members, advocates, and change-makers. A small ceremony was held, introducing the Derek Cole Leadership Citation, a new annual award recognizing courage in corporate reform. Evan, the young flight attendant who had stayed silent but later spoken up, stood at the podium to present it. He read from a handwritten note. "Power," he said, isn't proven by how loudly you speak. It's proven by what you fix when no one's watching. Derek accepted the award with one nod. No speech, just presence. And in that moment, everyone in the room knew this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a new standard. Because the next time someone like Derek boards a flight, they won't just see a man in a suit. They'll see a warning, a blueprint, a reminder that silence, when weaponized, can break trust, but presence, when deliberate, can rebuild it from the ground up.